most people think there's really only one way to do a relationship or a romantic relationship. And for most people, it goes kind of like this. You meet someone, at first it's amazing, you're obsessed, all you can think about is being with that person. You spend time together, and the outside world doesn't matter, everything is wonderful. In those early stages, you're not possessive of the person, because what right do you have to possess the person you just met? You're just happy to be with the person. There's very little thought either of you might have about being together forever. You're not resentful of the past. And so what happens in the early stages of a relationship, a new relationship, and let's say the first few months or even the first year or two in some cases, is that people actually are quite happy and they are able to sort of escape their worries and their ego and their pain and their problems while they're together. But that stage isn't going to last. It just doesn't last beyond that new relationship energy or NRE stage. The only way to make a relationship stay blissful and wonderful indefinitely is to escape your ego. And it's extremely rare for anyone to be able to escape their ego, and especially rare for two people to be able to do it together. What happens, first of all, let me talk about what I mean by escaping the ego. And that is very clearly, what is the ego? And I think very few people actually talk about what we mean by ego. People use it as though they understand what the word means, but very few of us have given much thought, or even if we have, we don't know how to know. Am I ego, or am I outside of my ego? Am I an egomaniac or not? And very simply, the easiest way to know whether you are reacting from the ego or whether your partner is reacting from the ego is if you are playing one of 6 roles. And I got this from a wonderful book called Games Ego Plays by Kevin Fitzmaurice. No one probably knows this book. He's an obscure writer, I think, from Seattle. And in the book, he describes the 6 roles that ego plays. So if you find yourself doing any of these things, or if you find your partner doing any of these things, you know you are operating from the place of the ego. Are you judging? Are you judging your partner or judging people around you? Are you prosecuting? So are you actually accusing someone like, hey, I think you were talking with your ex last night, or you are, were you really where you say you were, or, what is that really about? You're accusing someone as a prosecutor. If you're doing that, you're operating from your ego. If you are defending yourself, if you're a defendant, if someone accuses you of something or someone judges you and actually go and you try to argue your case and defend yourself, that's also ego. It's the ego defending itself. I know this, follow me here, I know it's probably a little bit hard to understand, because this is probably, you might not be able to imagine how life might look if you weren't doing these things. What would I be doing if not these things, right? I will just talk about that, and I will show you. Another role of the ego, and you're living in the ego, or the ego is very present in your relationship, if you are a jailer. So if someone did something wrong and you catch your partner doing something wrong and you say, well, I don't want to ever let you do that again, or will you agree to never do that again? You're acting as a jailer. You are, you're violating a lot of principles of love, and you're acting from the ego. What else is there? The offender. Now the offender is the person that goes out there. And if you've ever seen the movie American Beauty by Kevin, with Kevin Spacey, his character was an offender. He didn't care what anybody thought. He went and did what he wanted to, and it was very destructive behavior. An offender is a person who becomes an alcoholic or cheats or just does reckless things. That's also part of the ego. It's not loving. And finally, the victim. Anybody who stays in the victim role, like, oh my God, you cheated on me, or you flirted with that person last month, and So these are things that the ego is doing. And if you find any of that in your relationship, you know that you are allowing the ego to be part of your relationship. And it's the thing about the ego is that, most people see it as, well, it's not so bad. Of course my partner's jealous. Of course I'm I get jealous sometimes. Of course I try to control or try to change my partner. Of course that happens to me, and that's to be expected in a relationship. But the thing about the ego is if you allow some of that in your relationship, then you're allowing it to control your relationship. There's no such thing as less ego. Either the ego has control over you or it doesn't. And when it has control over you, you are serving it. It is your mind constantly worrying, constantly manipulating, constantly stressing out in fear, all these negative emotions and this pain. And if you allow yourself to go in that state, if you allow your relationship to be based on that, over time, and not very much time, let's give it a few months or a few years, you're going to find yourself pretty miserable. And that's how most people do relationships, do marriages, and they think that success is tolerating that horrible situation as something that's inevitable and letting it last a lifetime. And congratulations, we died miserable and we did it. And what I have discovered through a lot of reading, a lot of experimenting, through many relationships I've had with people, and through, most importantly, through my current relationship of some time now, let's call it long enough to be beyond that new relationship energy stage, is that it is possible to have a relationship without any ego. And I want to talk about that because I think most people don't understand what that might feel like. So, a relationship without ego is one in which you do not fight. And it's not that you're trying to control yourself, you're not trying to hold back and restrain yourself. You just don't fight. You don't argue. You don't accuse. You don't attack. You accept unconditionally. Whatever it is, if you claim to love that person, you have to love everything about that person. You have to be fully present and fully understanding. Unconditional acceptance, unconditional love at all times. You might slip away from that for a moment or two, and then you have to get back, and you have to just reset. The magic is that you don't have to wait for the other person to go first. In my relationship with her, and I want to have her on some of these videos in the future. Right now, she's not feeling all as well as usual, and I want to do this video today. And so in the future, I want to have, and that's the most amazing thing, is to be able to talk about these things openly, even with the person who you're with, to be able to put these videos out and say whatever is the truth of that moment, and let her to be able to see it. And that's the kind of relationship we have. A lot of people say, well, I would do that, but my partner is, I have to, that person would never do that for me, so I'm not going to do that first. Well, that's, you just playing, it's all about your pride, and that's ego, of course. So in our relationship, she actually, I would say, went first. I had more to learn than she did. She somehow was naturally oriented in a way that her ego just didn't develop the way that other people's do. And so, I had this massive ego, to be honest, a few years ago. And every time I sort of would do those attacks or play those roles, she would just kind of not respond and just kind of understand and be patient and be silent in some cases and just watch me. And over time, it was like that sort of space, that calm, that centered space that she presented was able to just suck that horrible ego energy away from me. And I was able to start mirroring that behavior, and I was able to through her going first, I would say, it gave me the space to be able to give her the same thing in return. And after some time, we found ourselves in this very comfortable relationship where it wasn't needy, there's no dependency, there's no plans of the future, there's no resentment from the past, there's the present moment. There's an ongoing present moment that's just absolutely beautiful. And when that happens, what's interesting is that when you get into that space of love and you let go of your ego, you let go of your pride, you let go of those ego roles, you find yourself you find the other way of doing things almost completely comical and hilarious. And the other relationships and friendships that you might have become a train wreck. Because for a person who insists upon, and insist is a great ego word, isn't it? You insist upon trying to control me, trying to change me, trying to accuse me, all these things. So I was in a relationship with my wife where that's the way it was. And it doesn't matter how much I tried to meet that relationship with, with this kind of love and acceptance, I wouldn't get it back. And in fact, what happens is when you're with someone who insists on being within the ego, they get very frustrated. If you read something like the Tao Te Ching, it talks about how about inaction. You don't have to try to figure out what to do with your relationships or with your situations in life. You don't have to plan and strategize. That's all of the mind, and you have to let go of the mind. And when you do that, and you live in the present moment, and you're with a person who's in the ego, that means they are manipulating. That means they are resenting things that happened in the past. That means they're worried about whether you're together forever in the future. And what you find is that person is not in the present moment. You can't meet them where you are. Love can only exist, true love only exists in the present moment. Love is something that happens to you when you let go of when you let go of your mind and your ego trying to control everything. And the person, it's just totally incompatible when you're trying to be with someone who's of the ego, and you've let go of your ego, you've escaped your ego, and you're loving. It's very frustrating for the person, not for you, because when you're in this state, nothing frustrates you. You're meditating. You're able to, that anything, you don't take anything personally. You're just always at peace and calm, which is kind of the state that I've been in for the past almost 9 months or more now. And when I'm with someone who's of the ego, they try their attacks and their little insults and their comments, and they try to shut down true communication. They try to, rather than looking in the eyes and communicating in the moment, maybe they're on their Apple Watch or their iPhone and constantly thinking and worrying about this and that and what's going to happen and what am I going to get from this, and why didn't they say this, and why didn't they do this, and oh my God, where are we going to go next, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to make this day last forever? And that person, and you're sitting here in the present moment just watching this crazy person, and it's actually kind of funny because they're using games trying to get you to respond to things. Maybe one day you're friends on Facebook, the next day you're not friends on Facebook, and you're like, I've just been sitting here the whole time watching this and hoping to communicate directly with you, and you're trying to attack because you're afraid of communicating directly in the present moment. It just becomes really funny. And so what ends up happening is that naturally those people go away from your life. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be loving and accepting and watch and never respond to attack. And that's one of the most difficult things to learn is that everyone gets attacked, and by attack I mean like some kind of insult or some kind of comment that's supposed to mean something, and then you're supposed to defend yourself, or you're supposed to attack back and change the game. You can play those games if you're having fun, but really, if you're truly being love, you just don't even respond. You might say, is that so? So you don't even defend yourself. And that's going to be so frustrating to the person who's they're trying to pull you away from the present moment. They're trying to possess, their ego, their mind is trying to possess you and trying to own you in the future, trying to get you to feel shame and guilt about something in the past, trying to eliminate all uncertainty. And meanwhile, if you go with that, if you have that conversation, if you defend yourself, what's going to happen is you are going to be pulled away from your beautiful state of peace in the present moment, and that sense of love and that ability to be love and to generate love and to be giving and to be immortal, in a sense, to be able to live in that space of silent, unchanging truth. That's going to be somewhat eroded if you're going to go there. And so you don't go there, and the person who you're with is going to be very frustrated, because they're going to think they're going to think that you're not being attentive to their needs. They're going to think that you don't understand them. And the attacks are going to increase, and they're going to get more crazy, and the relationship gets more crazy, and they're going to think, oh, you're trying to be all spiritual and you're trying not to respond to me. But actually, you don't have a need to respond. And you look in the person's eyes, and they're not looking into yours, and they're scattered, and they're in pain, and they're frustrated, and you just wish that you could connect in that present moment. But it doesn't happen just like that. It doesn't happen to somebody. You can't pull them there. You cannot pull them there. We've all had that feeling, I think, of maybe on a first date or something, where you're just trying to get that person into your world, and you're trying to please that person. You're trying to pull them somewhere. And I think what you're really trying to do is trying to pull that person into the present moment, and they're too busy thinking and analyzing everything in their mind that they're not aware of that. And you end up just letting go of your space and your inner peace, and you're giving it to this person, and you're not, and then so it actually does damage the person trying to give. And it's much easier just to let go and just to say, here I am, and I'm listening to you, and I'm open to you. I'm 100% open to you and accepting of you, whoever you are, and just see what happens, and be willing to let a person go. You cannot shape a relationship. You cannot manipulate it. You cannot do that, because a relationship is something that exists in the present. A love relationship is something that is based on love, not based on ego, arrangements, and negotiations, and commitments, and shame, and guilt, and promises, and lying, and holding back. It's honest, it's open, it's accepting both ways. Nothing is threatened because there is nothing to threaten. Be in the present moment with that person. Let go of ideas of the future. Let go of any pain from the past. And you find yourself in this ongoing, blissful state that can just go on and on and on in the present moment in love, and it's beautiful. So I'll be talking more about this soon.